Welcome to today's episode of Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis. On today's episode, we're going to be speaking with Ward 2 Councillor Keenan Aylwin. Keenan is the first openly gay councillor here in Barrie. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that he's faced as a member of the 2 SLGBTQ community, including the challenges around this crosswalk. So once again, welcome to Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis. My guest today is the wonderful Ward 2 Councillor for the City of Barrie, my good friend Keenan Aylwin. Keenan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being on.
Happy to be here.
So, as you know, this show is centered around all things 2 SLGBTQ with a major focus on Simcoe Muskoka. So I want to start with, obviously, you as the first openly gay councillor in Barrie. What does that mean to you and what you can bring to our community?
It means a lot, actually. As you know, a gay man, I guess a gay kid growing up in Barrie, closeted. I was the only openly gay kid at my high school at the time. It wasn't easy at times, but I think we've come a long way, and this is just one symbolic thing that I think makes a difference to those out there who may be struggling with their sexuality or their gender identity, that you belong here, that you have a voice, and that you can stay in Barrie, make a life in Barrie, and be happy and be open.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I grew up just outside of Barrie. I grew up in Shelburne, Ontario, so I know the area very well. I've only been back here for almost 3 years now, but I agree. We have come a long way, but I think you'll agree, we still have a very long way to go. When I think back to when I graduated high school back in 1985, a lot really hasn't changed. Yeah. This is still a very, very conservative area, and a lot of antiquated ideas and values still seem to cling to a lot of the citizens in this area. And what can we be doing to help maybe accelerate that pace that we're on? Because you're right, we have seen improvement and change, but I don't think it's happening nearly as fast as it should and could. Yeah,
no, I agree completely. And I think if you look at some of the social determinants of health and the disparity between the heterosexual community, the cisgender community, and the 2 SLGBTQ community, there are huge disparities there. We know that 2 SLGBTQ people are overrepresented in the population of people experiencing homelessness, overrepresented in low-income groups, and that's a huge issue, and we have to start addressing those disparities. I know trans people in particular still face violence on a regular basis, and that's unacceptable. So you're right, we have to keep doing everything we can to support those groups, those communities. And there are a lot of great organizations locally that do work. Gilbert Center is one of them. Barrie Pride, Fierté Simcoe Pride are very important groups to be a voice for those communities. And we have made some pretty important symbolic wins, like the Rainbow Crosswalk, like having the Fierté Simcoe Pride Festival right here in this square. I was here just a couple weeks ago, and it was an awesome day. And it's pretty special to see something like that happen in our main public square in downtown Barrie. Well,
you've mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to touch on in this interview as well, and we'll start with what you first mentioned, the crosswalk, which we're sitting just across from right now, and that was a challenge. I think is a politically correct way to talk about that. I know a year ago when we first broached the subject of a crosswalk, and I actually helped start the petition online to get some support behind it, and I try not to, but you look at some of the comments that folks make about what the crosswalk means, and the whole why do we need it, just the same as why do we need pride. I mean, these are all the straight cisgendered world that doesn't understand, or I think in many cases doesn't want to understand, is the bigger problem. But tell me about some of the challenges that you faced, because you were instrumental in making sure that the crosswalk actually happened. I mean, we had a petition a year ago, but it sort of started and ended there. As one of the folks behind getting that petition going, I honestly just didn't know where to take it.
Right.
So the fact that you were in office and able to actually move this forward on the agenda, tell me more about how that played out.
Yeah, well, I do want to say, like, it couldn't have been done without the community support, without that petition that had started a while back. There was a desire from the community to have something like this, so it couldn't have happened without that community support. But absolutely, some of the comments you see online, some of the private messages I received from random people were absolutely disgusting. And that right there points to the reason why we need something like this.
Well, the anonymity of the internet makes some people really brave, right?
Absolutely.
And I've used brave in a very sarcastic way.
Yeah, and you know what? I think people don't see the benefits to the broader community as well of having something like this. I mean, there's the pure economic argument around tourism and attracting people to our downtown, but also the value of people feeling like they have a place in our community and feeling included. We know that feeling of inclusion helps people have better health outcomes. So it can actually be a savings down the road in real dollars for governments. But I think the symbolic aspect is the most important piece. The number one thing I heard was, why are you spending tax dollars on something like this? But I think that was really important that we showed that the city of Barrie itself stood behind this community and was willing to put our money where our mouth is.
Right.
And so out of those conversations came the first ever micro grant program for 2S LGBTQ organizations in Barrie. It's a small amount of money, but it's a start. It's the first time we've actually seen municipal funding for groups like this. And I think it's a good opportunity to expand some of that programming and services for the 2S LGBTQ community.
And do we have any updates on that funding? And I know applications have been submitted. Have there been any decisions on where the money's going?
So no decisions have been made for the grant funding, but city staff are reviewing the applications and will hopefully be making an announcement sometime this fall.
Awesome.
But I think that small amount of money could really go a long way to improving those services in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more that this funding for the crosswalk, it was important that it be funded by the city. I know you had a fellow councillor and a few fellow councillors that didn't agree with that and went out and raised some funds, which is fantastic, and I applaud them for those efforts. But I am glad that in the end it was funded by the city. Now, recently as well, we've had some vandalism on the crosswalk, which I think was expected.
Absolutely.
There's very few crosswalks that any city puts down that doesn't end up with some sort of vandalism around it, and I was kind of watching the crosswalk from the balcony of my building, but I wasn't around the weekend that the incident happened. And do we know has anything come of that? Did they ever find out?
No, I don't think they ever caught the person who did it. But honestly, I think the community reaction was really encouraging. I saw a lot of community support after that happened, and one burnout on a crosswalk is not going to stop us.
Oh, absolutely not.
It's one minor setback, but the strength of our community is so much more than that.
Yeah, we've overcome a lot more than burnouts on a crosswalk.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So when we talk about the challenges within our community, the 2S LGBTQ community, one of the things that strikes me is the mental health challenges that come along with that. And it struck me last night on Facebook. I was reading a post and you were talking about the state of the world in general today and how taxing that is on all of us. But one of the lines that really struck me and hit a chord was the fact that you've been struggling with depression around that, those ideas of where the world is right now and where we're going. But you also indicated that it hasn't just been over the last few months, but years. And as someone who has also struggled with mental health issues in their lifetime, I think that's an important subject for us to talk about and how it affects our community. We were talking before we went on air about anyone who identifies as 2S LGBTQ and has ever been closeted for whatever amount of time, has had to deal with that. I mean, I was in the closet for 38 years and kept that hidden and learned how to lie and manipulate and hide the fact that I wasn't living my authentic self. And that is very taxing on an individual. And I'd like to hear more from you on your perspective on mental health and how it affects those of us in our community.
Yeah, it's a huge issue in our community. I've suffered from depression since I was probably 17 or 18. Had some really tough times, had to leave university and move back home because of my struggle with depression. And yeah, we absolutely need to talk about it. We need to acknowledge the fact that there are real world events that are affecting our mental health as well. It's why are we seeing such a prevalence of depression, of anxiety in our community, but in the broader community as well. I think a lot of people are feeling isolated. And how do we overcome that? We need to build community. We need to get in a room face to face and build that community. But that's easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think having conversations like this help with that as well. And I think we need to see more of that and have folks like you in the public eye that are brave enough to come out and say, yes, you know what, I have suffered from depression. I still suffer from depression, and there's no shame in that.
Absolutely.
It's mental illness is no different than any other illness, and I think the more we talk about that and break down and dismantle the stigma around it, that's when I think we're going to see some real change happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things, at least for me, that has been so helpful and healing is finding a sense of purpose in the community. So getting involved in politics and political activism has been incredibly healing for me. A lot of people are lacking that sense of purpose and feeling powerless because of the state of the world, and the problems we're facing are so daunting, overwhelming. The Amazon is burning, income inequality is rampant, our democracies seem to be failing. Those are huge issues.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's normal to feel overwhelmed by those, but just getting involved in the community, finding that sense of purpose and shared purpose with the broader community is incredibly healing.
Yeah, and I think a quote that comes to mind was, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, when you find a job you love, you'll never work again a day in your life. And I know I've certainly found that over the last few years with the activism and advocacy that I've been doing, and then landing my role at the Gilbert Center. It was, I worked for 20 years in the finance world and didn't realize how much I hated it until I wasn't in it any longer, and finally started doing something that I truly have a passion for. And I think I'm working more now than I ever have. But again, it doesn't feel like it because I'm doing what I love, and I'm okay when my phone rings at 4 o'clock in the morning if it's somebody that needs to talk to me and that I can help. So I think you're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah, it's so fulfilling.
And you're lucky because you're doing it at a much younger age. It took me 50 years to figure it out. So good for you, good for you. I think one of the things that probably helped you with being able to discover that in a much earlier stage in life than myself, not that I didn't have supportive and loving and understanding parents, but we've grown up in different times. But I think one of the things that you'll agree with that has really helped you along the way is your family and your parents. And tell me about that relationship and how that's been able to shape you as an individual and make it easier for you to be able to be your authentic self.
No, absolutely. I'm incredibly privileged to have the family support that I have. My parents are there for me all the time. In particular, when I was going through my struggles with depression in university, they came to Kingston where I was away at school and picked me up and brought me home, and they were there for me in my time of need, and they still are there for me. So I recognize that a lot of people don't have that support, and that's where the community services and community support is so important. But absolutely, that's been a huge help for me, is having that family support, and my friends as well have been incredibly supportive.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you, like myself, we've had our biological family as a support system, where, as you say, there are other folks who aren't as privileged to have that in their lives, and that's where those other supports and a chosen family is very important for a lot of individuals. And I think it's important to recognize that. But I think it's equally important to recognize when we have a biological family that really stands behind us. I know
for sure.
It was my own was my own thought process that kept me closeted as long as it did. It wasn't my family. And when I finally made the decision to, you know what, enough is enough, I'm just going to be me.
Yeah.
That was one thing that wasn't a worry. I wasn't concerned at all about being disowned by my family, and all they cared about was, the only question I got was, are you happy?
Yeah.
And I think that's incredible. And yeah, I feel the same way. I'm very privileged to be able to say that. So as we enter an election cycle coming up, and 2020 around the corner, what do you see for the city and how it reflects on our community, and what do you see for a broader picture for the world?
Well, I just can't believe that we're back to talking about gay marriage, the right to choose, a woman's right to choose. It feels like we've gone back in time.
Absolutely.
So that's incredibly disheartening, especially since we're facing so many huge challenges. The climate crisis is at our doorstep, and I don't think there's any bigger challenge than that. And we really need to come together regardless of partisan stripe, of party stripe, and find solutions to that crisis. We can actually solve that issue and create a better world. I know it doesn't seem possible sometimes, but it's absolutely possible, the scientists tell us, but we don't have a lot of time.
Right.
And so that's why I think this election is incredibly critical to humanity, to our future. We need to act now. And I just hate to see us get caught up in battles of the past when we have so much to fight for in the present.
So what do you think, because you talk about the fact that and a lot of folks feel this way, it feels like we've turned back the clock and we've gone back in time.
Yeah.
What was it, do you think, that sort of spurred that? Because we seem to be on a really strong path of progressive policies and moving forward, and then all of a sudden, like a flip of a switch, the world's gone haywire. And why do you think that is?
I think it's because people are feeling very real, valid anxiety about their situation, their economic situation, the threat of climate change as well, and there are some people in positions of power who are exploiting that anxiety and using it to divide us, to hold on to power or to gain power. And that we should not stand for that. We should stand against that, and we should actually unite people around a common cause to address those anxieties, acknowledge that they're valid, that people aren't getting ahead, that for the first time in modern history, this generation is going to be worse off than our parents' generation. So it's disappointing to see politicians exploit that, and I think that's why we've seen sort of that backlash around social progress that we've seen in the last couple decades, and it is disheartening, but I think we can overcome it.
I agree, and I think one of the pluses, I guess, that has come from this is I think we're seeing a resurgence of what it means to be a real activist around social issues that sort of went to the wayside because we got comfortable.
Absolutely.
And I think the fact that we're seeing these forces come into play and come into power that are threatening that, I think that's really lit a fire under a lot of folks that I hope means change quickly.
Yeah.
We've seen periods of our history where we've gone down this path before, and I'm hoping that we recognize it much sooner and can avoid some of the tragedies that we've seen in the past.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very important, and that is something that really shows me that we've got a future ahead, is the fact that people are not putting up with it. They're fighting back, and we're getting teachers saying, okay, Premier Ford, this may be your policy, but this is not what we're teaching the children that are going to be sitting in front of us, because when they're in our classroom, they're not just their parents' children, they become our children as well. And I think that's huge. I think that's really going to make a difference. And that pushback we've already seen has changed some of those initial policies.
Absolutely. And what gives me a lot of hope too is the young people on the front lines of these issues. Like on the sex ed issue, they were orchestrating demonstrations in their schools. On climate change, they're out for Fridays for Future, climate strike, telling older generations, you need to act in our interest. We can't vote yet. So vote in our interests, because our future is at stake, and that gives me a whole lot of hope.
Absolutely, and let's just hope that people actually do vote.
Yes.
I think that's the biggest thing that we've seen is the struggle. It's we fight for and against some of these policies, but then when it comes down to election day, we stay home.
Yeah.
And why do you think that is? Is there no way that we can make the process easier? I mean, we're coming up to 2020.
Yeah.
We can do everything online. Why can't we vote online?
Absolutely, I agree. I mean, there are some people who are worried about security issues with
Sure.
voting online, but I think we need to do everything we can do to get people out to vote. That is the critical piece. But why do people not vote? And I think it's because they feel so disheartened with the system,
apathy.
that they're seeing that their vote isn't making a difference. And how do we fix that? I think we need to elect politicians who have integrity, who are going to do what they say they're going to do, and not just act in a way that holds on to power, to hold on to power.
Right.
Yeah.
So what can we be doing now to encourage people to get out and vote?
Mm-hmm. Talking to your neighbors, like something as simple as getting out and talking to your neighbors, inviting them over for dinner or for a barbecue. I think those simple gestures are critical. We all feel so isolated and disconnected from each other, ironically in a time when we're more connected than ever through the internet. But I think those face-to-face interactions are critical to building that shared sense of purpose, and really feeling like you can make a difference in your community and that your vote and your voice matter.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think those face-to-face communications are certainly much more valid than what we do online.
Yeah.
There's certainly a lot more punch to that, and you've been doing that since you've been elected to council. You have town halls on a fairly regular basis with the community and talk about issues and find out from the community what they want to see as far as change goes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've had some uncomfortable conversations where people show up, disagree with something strongly, and we have those conversations. We don't shy away from them. And I think we need to do more of that. When we're behind a keyboard, it's really easy for us to get stuck in our corners and not see other perspectives. But when we're face to face, it's a lot easier to have a human conversation.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this show is put it out there to the community as well. And when I have guests like yourself on, I did a post saying, Keenan's going to be on the show. If you got a burning question that you want to have answered, let me know and I'll ask it for you. And I think engaging the community and that sort of thing, and maybe I'll show up at one of your town halls and try and engage the community that way as well.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I think those are wonderful ways to get people's buy-in and make them feel like, again, they have some input and some power. Because I think a lot of the reason why folks don't vote and sit at home and just watch the broadcasts on TV is because they don't feel they can make a difference. Yet when we're out there and we actually have a voice and can talk to someone and know whether they agree or not, know that they've been heard, I think that can make a difference, absolutely. So I applaud you for doing that. I think that's wonderful.
Thank you.
So you were elected last year. So you've been a councillor now for a little over a year?
Yeah,
Are we at a year yet?
I got sworn in December 1st.
Right,
So,
So
under
World
a year,
AIDS Day.
Yeah, there you go.
So what does the future hold for Keenan Aylwin, both in local municipal politics and beyond? Because I'm fairly certain you have aspirations beyond the mayor's office, for example.
Well,
sorry, Jeff.
Well, I don't know. I'm as you said, just under a year into my term of 4 years. So there's a lot more to learn. I'm still young. I don't really know what I want to do with my future. There's been some stressful, difficult moments in this first year.
Really?
On council.
I haven't heard any of that.
So we'll see how I feel after 4 years. But for now, I'm happy where I am, and we'll go from there.
Awesome, awesome. Well, we're certainly happy that you're where you are. You've already made a big difference within this community in the short time that you have been a councillor. Even before that, because even before you were elected, you were making a difference and talking to folks about the change that needs to happen, and doing more than just talking about it. Actually putting action to those words, and I think that's incredibly important. We can talk till we're blue in the face, but if we don't actually do something,
for sure,
then we're doing a disservice to our community. So I absolutely applaud you for that, and I think you're doing a wonderful job. So,
thanks, Randy.
So, in the final few moments that we have here to chat, I'm going to give you a platform to talk to the 2 SLGBTO community in our local area, and just give us some words of wisdom, some thoughts of where you see the community going and what we need to be doing differently to try and overcome some of the hatred that we're seeing out there.
For sure.
And I say that loosely because I think Barrie is one of the safest places in Canada.
Oh, absolutely.
I think was it the second safest city in
we were second.
in
I don't know
Ontario?
if we still are, but yeah, very
so
safe.
I think that's important to stress, that while we do have those challenges, and sometimes I feel very uncomfortable with the idea of walking down Dunlop Street holding my husband's hand.
Yeah.
I think for the most part we live in a very safe and accepting city, and I think it's important that we make sure that people recognize that as well. But I'm going to give you the floor to talk to more about those issues.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I know when I was growing up here, I always wanted to leave Barrie. I couldn't wait to get out, actually. And so I went away to university, and I thought, you know what, I'm never coming back. But then after struggling with depression, I came home. I realized, you know what, Barrie has a lot to offer. We have a lot of potential, and we're never going to live up to that potential if all the young people leave.
Right.
So I hope, especially people in the 2 SLGBTQ community, try to stay in the community. I know it may be hard at times, and you may feel like you have to leave, and I get that. But we have an opportunity to shape the future of our city and make it the inclusive and beautiful city that we know it can become. So I guess I would say stay and get involved and make a difference in the city.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Or if you feel you need to leave, then, you know, and it's okay to go away for a while.
Absolutely.
We've proven that.
Absolutely.
I went away for 30 years before coming back to this area.
For sure.
But it's encouraging those folks who may feel they need to go away to take that time they need and not judge them for it, but recognize that we're a welcoming community and come back when you're ready.
Yeah,
and,
you always have a home here.
Yeah, wonderful. Keenan, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me on, this is only the second episode that will air of this wonderful new adventure that I'm on, and I'm glad you're along for the ride with us. So thank you very much for your time today. It really means a lot.
Thanks, Randy. Thanks for having me. It was awesome.
Thanks, folks. We've got more Let's Be Perfectly Queer with Randy Davis coming up again, so please feel free to follow me on the Facebook page that we've created for the program. As I mentioned when we were talking a little bit earlier, this is a show that is for all folks within our community, and we're looking for input from you on what you want to see, who you want me to talk to, questions that you want answered. We've got another segment that we'll be introducing on future episodes called Asking for a Friend. I want to hear what those questions are that you want to have your friends find out the answers to. So please get in touch with us. Facebook, Messenger, any way you can track me down, I will listen to you, and we'll try and get those answers and the information on the air for you. So thank you again for tuning in tonight, and hope to see you again next week.